Evening settles. The sky darkens. First stars appear, faint against the fading blue, then brighter as twilight deepens. You've seen this countless times, but tonight is different. Tonight you're not just watching. Tonight you're going there. Not physically. Your body remains where it is, comfortable, relaxed, already beginning to release the day. But your mind drifts upward, drawn by the stars, lifted gently away from Earth, beginning a journey through the cosmos. A quiet journey, a peaceful one, a journey that leads, eventually, to sleep. Let go of the ground. Feel it falling away beneath you, not sudden but gradual, the way sleep itself approaches, slow, inevitable, welcome. The room around you fades, the ceiling opens, the atmosphere thins, and you rise weightless into the gathering dark. There's no rush. You have time, all the time there is. The stars have waited billions of years. They can wait a little longer. You drift upward slowly, the way a leaf rises on a thermal current, effortless, carried by something larger than yourself. The air grows thin, then thinner, then disappears entirely. Silence arrives, not the silence of a quiet room, but the absolute silence of space, where no air exists to carry sound, where nothing disturbs the perfect stillness. This silence is peaceful, complete. It wraps around you like darkness, like rest, like the edge of sleep. Below, Earth curves away, blue and white, clouds swirling slowly over oceans and continents. Cities glow in the twilight zone, tiny lights scattered across darkness. You're rising above all of it, above weather and wind, above the atmosphere's protective blanket, into the void beyond. The stars grow brighter, no longer faint points struggling through atmospheric haze. They shine clearly now, thousands of them, then tens of thousands, filling the darkness with ancient light. Each one a sun, each one distant, each one burning steadily, patiently, unchanging across the years you've lived and the years before you were born. You're weightless here, no up or down, no effort required to float. Your body, distant now, rests comfortably. But this part of you, the part that wonders, that dreams, drifts free, untethered, moving slowly through the cosmic dark toward destinations you've only imagined. The moon hangs ahead, silver against black, familiar yet strange from this perspective. Not a disk in Earth's sky, but a world three-dimensional, spherical, real. Its surface catches sunlight on one side, glows softly, inviting. The other side fades into shadow, invisible except where Earth light reflects faintly, a whisper of illumination in the dark. You drift toward it, not quickly. There's no hurry in this journey. Speed would disturb the peace, break the gentle rhythm of drifting. You move at the pace of dreams, the pace of thoughts before sleep, slow and steady and inevitable. Earth recedes behind you. The moon grows larger ahead. And the stars remain constant, unchanging, eternal, watching your passage with the patience of light that has traveled for lifetimes just to reach this moment. This is the beginning, the first part of a journey that will carry you far from the familiar, deep into regions where few have gone, where space stretches vast and empty and peaceful. You're safe here. Nothing threatens, nothing disturbs. There's only the gentle drift, the darkness, the stars, and the quiet voice guiding you onward. Let yourself go. Release whatever tensions remain. The day is over. Its concerns don't follow you here. Space doesn't care about schedules or worries or the things you meant to do. Space simply is vast, patient, peaceful, and you're part of it now, drifting through it, held by nothing but the gentle momentum carrying you forward. The moon awaits. Beyond it, Mars. Beyond Mars, the asteroid belt and the giant planets, Saturn's rings and the outer dark, regions of space so distant that sunlight fades to starlight, where the solar system gives way to interstellar void. But that's ahead. For now there's just this, the gentle rise away from Earth, the stars brightening around you, the moon growing slowly larger, and the peace of knowing you're safe, you're drifting, you're beginning a journey through the cosmos that ends, eventually, in sleep. Let the journey continue. Close your eyes if you wish, or keep them half open, barely focused, letting the darkness and the stars blur together into gentle patterns. Either way, you're moving. Either way, the cosmos carries you forward, and all you have to do is drift. The blue fades. Not suddenly, nothing here is sudden, but gradually the atmosphere's familiar color gives way to deeper shades, darker blues becoming purple, purple becoming black. You're above the air now, above the layer where weather happens and birds fly, in the region where only satellites orbit and astronauts float. Earth spreads below, vast from here, though you know how small it is from farther out. Oceans cover most of what you see, Pacific stretching endlessly, blue-gray under clouds, darker where depths plunge miles down. Continents edge into view, brown and green, mountains casting shadows, rivers catching light like silver threads. The planet rotates slowly, too slow to see directly, but you know it's turning, carrying day into night, night into day, the eternal rhythm continuing, whether you watch or not. Cities vanish into daylight. Others emerge from darkness, their lights beginning to glow as evening arrives for the people far below. You're above all of it now. The concerns that seemed important hours ago, deadlines, conversations, tasks unfinished, they're down there, on the surface, left behind. They'll be there tomorrow. But tonight, this moment, you're free of them, drifting in the silence above. The curvature becomes obvious. Earth's edge curves against the black, a thin blue line of atmosphere marking the boundary between world and void. This line is delicate, fragile looking, though it protects everything below. Above it, nothing. Just vacuum extending forever, cold and dark and empty except for the light of stars. Stars surround you now, not just above but all around below, to the sides, everywhere you look. Earth blocks some, a circular shadow below, but the rest of the sphere is filled with them. The Milky Way becomes visible, a river of light flowing across the darkness. Billions of stars too distant to see individually, their combined glow creating a pale band stretching from horizon to horizon. You could stay here, orbiting Earth, watching it turn beneath you. Many have. Astronauts spend months in this region, looking down at the world, seeing it whole, experiencing the perspective that changes how you think about borders and nations and human concerns. The overview effect, they call it. Seeing Earth from outside makes you understand how small it is, how fragile, how precious. But you're moving on, not leaving permanently. Earth is home, always will be. But tonight's journey carries you farther, deeper into the dark, toward the moon and beyond. So you let Earth recede, let it shrink slowly behind you, becoming smaller but no less beautiful, a blue marble hanging in the void. The silence is complete now, not just quiet, but absolutely soundless. No atmosphere means no sound, no wind, no voices, No engines or birds or distant traffic. If you could hear your heartbeat, you would, but even that is distant, your physical body resting far away while this part of you drifts free. This silence is peaceful, profound, the kind of quiet you've never experienced on Earth, because Earth is never truly silent. Always something moving, vibrating, making sound at frequencies you hear or don't hear. But here, nothing. Perfect stillness. The peace of the void. Ahead, the moon grows. Still distant, but larger now, details becoming visible. The dark patches Maria, ancient lava plains spread across its face like continents. Lighter regions, highlands, crater-scarred and rough. You can see individual craters now, circular walls casting shadows, floors filled with smaller impacts, the accumulated damage of 4 billion years. No air surrounds the moon, no weather ever touched it. The footprints left by Apollo astronauts remain unchanged decades later, will remain unchanged for millions of years until meteorite impacts eventually erase them. Time moves slowly on the moon. Things don't decay or erode the way they do on Earth. They just persist. You drift closer. Earth behind you is half full from this angle, blue and white against black. Beautiful, but distant. The moon fills your view ahead, gray and white and black in the stark sunlight, every detail sharp without atmosphere to blur them. This is the boundary between familiar and strange. Earth is home. The moon is the first step beyond, the first other world, the place where humans first left their planet and stood on another surface. Others have been here. You're following their path, drifting through the darkness they crossed, approaching the world they walked on. The moon awaits, silent, patient, ancient beyond human comprehension. And you're almost there. The moon doesn't reflect light the way you'd expect. It's dark, actually darker than asphalt, darker than most rocks on Earth, but in the sun's harsh light, without atmosphere to scatter that light, the moon glows silver white, bright enough to hurt if you stared directly at it. You don't stare. You drift closer, letting details resolve slowly. Craters cover everything. Small ones, large ones, craters within craters, overlapping patterns showing the sequence of impacts, newer craters sharp-edged and bright, older ones eroded by smaller impacts and radiation, their edges softened, their floors filled with debris. The moon has been struck countless times, each impact leaving permanent scar because nothing erases them here. But the scarring is beautiful, not despite the violence, but because of its patterns created by random impacts over billions of years. Unique and unrepeatable, the moon's face shaped by chance and time into something that seems almost intentional. You cross above the terminator, the line dividing sunlight from darkness. On one side, harsh illumination showing every detail. On the other, shadows so deep that you see nothing, just black regions where no light reaches, where the surface exists but remains invisible. Earth has twilight, gradual transitions from day to night. The moon has only sunlight and shadow, no in-between. But even in shadow, you're not blind. Earthlight reflects off the lunar surface faint, blue-white, gentle. Enough to see the landscape, to make out mountains and crater walls, to navigate through the darkness. Astronauts walked here using Earthlight to see, following their shadows cast by the planet hanging overhead. You drift lower, skimming over plains and mountains, following the curve of the surface. Here, a valley where lava once flowed, now frozen for 3 billion years. There, a crater so fresh its ejecta still looks bright, rays spreading radially for hundreds of kilometers, marking where an asteroid struck recently, meaning within the last 100 million years. There's no wind here, no sound, no movement except your own gentle drift. The moon is perfectly still, unchanging, patient. It's been here for 4.5 billion years, orbiting Earth, pulled by Earth's gravity, slowly receding at a few centimeters per year. It will be here billions of years more, long after humans are gone, still orbiting, still reflecting sunlight, still marked by ancient impacts. You could land. Put your feet on that gray dust, feel the 1/6 gravity, bounce with each step the way Apollo astronauts did. But tonight you're just passing through, drifting over the surface, seeing it whole before moving on. Earth rises over the lunar horizon. Not quickly, the moon rotates slowly. It takes a month to turn once. But you're moving fast enough that Earth slides upward, blue and white against black, familiar and strange from this perspective. The Apollo 8 astronauts saw this Earthrise from lunar orbit and photographed it, creating one of the most famous images in history. Now you see it too. Earth half-lit, cloud-swirled, hanging over the lifeless moon. This is what space exploration revealed. Earth is special. Not unique necessarily, we don't know yet if life exists elsewhere, but special in being alive, wet, dynamic. The moon is dead. Beautiful, ancient, worthy of study, but dead. Earth is alive, and seeing them together makes that difference clear. You begin to drift away, leaving the moon behind, heading deeper into the solar system. The moon shrinks slowly, becoming a crescent, then a sliver, then just a bright point among the stars. Earth remains visible, still bright, but smaller now, receding into the distance. Ahead lies Mars, 3 times farther from the sun than the moon is from Earth. Months away at the speed spacecraft travel, but you're moving faster, carried by the gentle momentum of this journey, drifting through the darkness toward the red planet. The silence continues. The stars remain constant, and you float onward, deeper into the cosmic dark, farther from home but not lost, never lost, just drifting peacefully through the void. Red appears ahead. Not bright red. Mars is actually quite dim from this distance, but distinctly red, rust-colored, different from the blue-white of Earth or the silver-gray of the moon. Mars hangs against the black, small but growing, a point becoming a disk, details emerging slowly. The sun is smaller here, still bright, still warming the side of Mars it illuminates, but visibly smaller than it appears from Earth. You're farther out, where sunlight is weaker, where days are colder, where the solar system begins to feel vast. Mars grows. Its features resolve polar ice caps, white against the rust, dark patches, spreading across the surface, lighter regions of dust. No oceans, no clouds except occasional wisps of water ice or carbon dioxide. Mars is a desert world, cold and dry, its atmosphere thin enough that you'd need a spacesuit to survive on the surface. But it wasn't always like this. You can see the evidence as you drift closer, valleys carved by ancient rivers, deltas where water once flowed into lakes or seas, layers of sediment showing wet periods alternating with dry. Billions of years ago, Mars had liquid water on its surface. It had a thicker atmosphere. It might have had life. Now it's silent. The rivers are gone, evaporated or frozen into the ground. The lakes are dust-filled basins. The atmosphere leaked away over millions of years, lost to space because Mars is too small, its gravity too weak to hold on to light gases. What remains is a thin envelope of carbon dioxide, Enough to create winds and dust storms, but not enough to support life as Earth knows it. You drift over Olympus Mons, the largest volcano in the solar system. It rises from the surface gradually, so large that standing on its slopes, you wouldn't see the peak or the base, just gentle upward terrain extending to the horizon. From above, it's enormous, wider than France, towering 25 kilometers high, its caldera complex enough to swallow cities. But it's dead. No lava has flowed here for millions of years, maybe hundreds of millions. Mars cooled internally, its volcanic activity slowing, stopping, leaving these massive monuments to an active past. Olympus Mons will stand for billions of years more, slowly eroding under meteor impacts and the weak winds, but essentially unchanged. Valles Marineris stretches below a canyon system so vast it would span the United States, so deep that Earth's Grand Canyon would be a small side valley. It cuts across Mars's equator, 4,000 kilometers long, 7 kilometers deep in places. If you fell from its rim, you'd fall for minutes before hitting the bottom. This canyon wasn't carved by water, it's a tectonic feature. Cracks in Mars's crust that opened as the planet cooled and contracted. But water did flow through it later, widening valleys, carving channels, leaving deposits that rovers have found and analyzed. The surface below is covered in dust, rust-red iron oxide, fine as talcum powder, coating everything. Winds carry it into the atmosphere during dust storms, sometimes global in extent, turning the sky from pink to brown-black, obscuring the surface for months. Right now it's clear, the sky that characteristic salmon pink from suspended dust particles, the sun smaller and dimmer than Earth's. Rovers are down there somewhere, tiny machines exploring on humanity's behalf, driving slowly over the rocks and dust, analyzing samples, searching for signs that life once existed or might still exist in sheltered places. You can't see them from here, they're too small, dwarfed by the planetary scale. But they're there, representing humans in this cold, distant place. 2 moons orbit Mars, Phobos, and Deimos, Fear and Dread, named for the companions of the war god. They're small, irregular, captured asteroids rather than moons formed with the planet. Phobos orbits close will crash into Mars in millions of years as its orbit decays. Deimos orbits farther, slower, will eventually escape into independent orbit around the Sun. You drift past both, tiny rocky bodies tumbling slowly, cratered and dark, companions to a world that's losing them just as it lost its atmosphere and water. Everything here speaks of loss, of a planet that had potential but couldn't keep it, that had water and warmth and possibly life but couldn't sustain them. Yet it's beautiful, desolate, yes, dead probably, but beautiful in its stark simplicity, its red deserts and towering volcanoes and vast canyons. Beautiful in the way ruins are beautiful, remnants of something that once was or might have been. Mars recedes behind you. Ahead lies the asteroid belt, a region of tumbling rocks orbiting the Sun, debris left over from planetary formation, or perhaps the remains of a planet that never formed, its material scattered by Jupiter's massive gravity. The solar system stretches vast ahead. Mars is the last of the rocky planets. Beyond lies the realm of giants Jupiter and Saturn, Uranus and Neptune, worlds so different from Earth that they seem alien, incomprehensible. But you're drifting toward them, carried deeper into the cosmic dark, farther from the Sun, toward cold and silence and the vast spaces between planets. The journey continues. The stars remain constant. and you float onward, peaceful, relaxed, drifting through the void. Space is empty here, more empty than you imagined. Movies show asteroid belts as dense fields of tumbling rocks, but reality is different, vast distances between objects, each asteroid separated from the next by hundreds of thousands of kilometers. You could drift through the belt and never see one up close unless you aimed deliberately. But they're here, millions of them, ranging from grains of dust to dwarf planets hundreds of kilometers across, all orbiting the sun between Mars and Jupiter, debris from the solar system's formation 4.5 billion years ago. Material that might have become a planet if Jupiter's gravity hadn't stirred it too much, preventing the fragments from clumping together. One drifts nearby irregular, potato-shaped, slowly tumbling end over end. It's gray, darker than the moon, cratered like everything in space that's been around long enough. No atmosphere, no gravity worth noticing, just a chunk of rock and metal spinning slowly through the void. It's been tumbling like this for billions of years. Will continue for billions more. Nothing stops it. No friction exists in vacuum to slow rotation. It just continues, eternal, patient, indifferent to time. The surface is powdery regolith created by countless small impacts, meteorites striking over eons, grinding the surface into dust that stays where it lands because no wind blows, no water flows. Some asteroids are solid rock. Others are rubble piles, fragments held together loosely by weak gravity, barely touching, ready to drift apart if disturbed. This one is ancient. You can see it in the layered craters, the subtle differences in color where different impacts exposed different minerals. Iron-rich areas appear reddish. Pristine silicates are gray. Some asteroids are almost pure metal iron and nickel cores from destroyed protoplanets, valuable beyond measure if humans ever figure out how to mine them economically. But that's future concern. Tonight you're just drifting past, watching this ancient rock tumble slowly, its shadow sharp against the starlit side, its sunlit face bright and stark. It's been here since the beginning. It will remain until some eventual collision destroys it, or sends it careening into the sun, or out into interstellar space. Another asteroid drifts farther away, barely visible, just a point of light moving slowly against the background stars. Then another and another. You're in the belt now, surrounded by invisible companions, each in its own orbit, each following its own path around the sun, all of them together, forming a ring of debris marking where a planet might have been. Jupiter dominates the inner edge of the belt, its gravity perturbing asteroid orbits, ejecting some toward the inner solar system, where they occasionally cross Earth's path. Others it captures, holding them in stable orbits at Lagrange points, families of asteroids leading and trailing Jupiter in its orbit. But Jupiter is distant still, farther than the asteroids, a bright point ahead, but not yet close enough to show features. You drift toward it slowly, leaving the belt behind, entering the gap between asteroids and giants. This region feels emptier. The sun behind you is noticeably smaller now, still bright but diminished, providing less warmth, less light. Out here, even summer noon is colder than Earth's winter night. Water ice is stable. Temperatures hover near absolute zero in shadow, barely warmer in sunlight. The darkness is deeper here. Fewer objects scatter sunlight, no planets nearby. Just void extending in all directions, cold and still and absolutely silent. This is what most of space is: emptiness, distances so vast that light takes hours to cross them, regions where nothing disturbs the perfect stillness. You could drift here forever and never encounter anything. Space is mostly nothing, punctuated occasionally by somethings, stars, planets, asteroids. But the nothings dominate, outnumbering the somethings by ratios almost incomprehensible. Yet it's peaceful. The emptiness isn't threatening, it's liberating. No demands here, no expectations. Just void and silence and the gentle momentum carrying you forward. You could stop worrying here. Nothing to worry about, nothing that needs doing. Just drift, just be, just exist in the quiet dark. Ahead, Jupiter brightens. Still small but growing, a disk now rather than a point, creamy white with hints of color browns and oranges and reds swirling in bands across its face. The largest planet in the solar system, bigger than all others combined, massive enough to almost be a star, but not quite. It needed 80 times more mass to ignite fusion. You drift toward it, leaving the asteroids behind, entering the realm of giants. Jupiter fills the view ahead. Not suddenly. Distance doesn't work that way in space. Changes happen gradually, almost imperceptibly, until you notice them. But Jupiter has been growing for what feels like hours, a bright point becoming a disk, then a world, details emerging slowly, like a photograph developing. The planet is enormous, 11 times Earth's diameter, 300 times Earth's mass, large enough that if it were hollow, over 1,000 Earths could fit inside. But it's not hollow. It's gas and liquid compressed by its own gravity, layers upon layers of hydrogen and helium pressed so tightly in the interior that they take on properties neither gas nor liquid, something in between, something that doesn't exist naturally on Earth. The Great Red Spot dominates the southern hemisphere, an anticyclonic storm wider than Earth, winds circling at hundreds of kilometers per hour, a vortex that has persisted for at least 4 centuries, possibly much longer. No one knows how old it truly is. Observers have been watching it since telescopes became powerful enough to resolve it, but it existed before that, and it continues now, slowly shrinking over decades, but still immense, still churning. From here, it's brick red against Jupiter's cream-colored clouds, the color coming from complex organic molecules created by lightning and ultraviolet light, compounds that drift through Jupiter's atmosphere and accumulate in the storm. The spot is actually cold, the coldest clouds in Jupiter's atmosphere, which is why it appears so distinct from surrounding regions. But despite the violent winds that would tear any human structure apart, pressures that would crush submarines, there's no sound. The storm rages in absolute silence. No atmosphere around you means no medium for sound to travel. You watch clouds churning, storms forming and dissipating, lightning flashing deep in the cloud layers, all of it happening mutely, violence without noise. Cloud bands wrap around Jupiter in parallel stripes, bright zones where gas rises from the interior, dark belts where gas sinks back down. These aren't like Earth's weather bands. They're driven by heat from Jupiter's interior more than sunlight from above. Jupiter radiates more energy than it receives from the sun, still cooling from its formation 4.5 billion years ago, contracting slowly, converting gravitational potential energy into heat. The bands are stable, persisting for decades or centuries, though smaller storms come and go. White ovals appear and disappear, some lasting years, others merging or being torn apart by the stronger currents. Brown barges drift through the belts, dark regions where deeper, warmer clouds are exposed. The atmosphere is constantly active, constantly changing, but the large-scale structure remains consistent. You drift closer, passing through the region where Jupiter's magnetosphere begins, the immense magnetic field generated by liquid metallic hydrogen in Jupiter's interior. This field is enormous, extending millions of kilometers, larger than the Sun itself. If you could see it from Earth, it would appear larger than the full moon. The magnetosphere traps charged particles, creating radiation belts more intense than Earth's Van Allen belts, more intense than anywhere in the solar system except the Sun itself. Spacecraft passing through must be hardened against radiation. Human missions to Jupiter's moons will need heavy shielding. The radiation would kill unprotected humans in hours, damage electronics, make long stays near Jupiter challenging. But you're safe in this journey, drifting without physical form, observing without being affected. The radiation passes through harmlessly, imperceptible, allowing you to approach as close as you wish without danger. 4 large moons orbit nearby, the Galilean satellites, discovered by Galileo in 1610, the first objects ever found orbiting something other than Earth. They're visible from Earth with even small telescopes, 4 points of light arranged in a line near Jupiter, their positions changing night by night as they orbit. Io is closest yellow and orange and red, looking like a pizza, according to one Voyager scientist's memorable description. It's the most volcanically active body in the solar system, eruptions constantly reshaping its surface, sulfur compounds creating the vivid colors. Jupiter's gravity pulls on Io, squeezing it rhythmically as it orbits, generating enormous internal heat, driving volcanism so intense that the entire surface is renewed every million years or so. Plumes of sulfur and sulfur dioxide erupt hundreds of kilometers high, falling back to coat the surface in fresh material. The eruptions never stop. Day and night, though Io's day is only 42 hours long. One orbit around Jupiter volcanoes erupt, lava flows, the surface changes. If you landed on Io, the ground beneath you would be young, possibly formed within your lifetime, definitely formed within human history. Europa orbits farther out, smaller, covered in cracked ice. Beneath that ice lies an ocean liquid water kept warm by tidal heating, similar to what drives Io's volcanism, but less intense. The ocean is deep, possibly 100 kilometers, containing more water than all of Earth's oceans combined. And where there's liquid water, there might be life. The ice surface is young too, though not as young as Io's. Cracks crisscross it, places where the ice separated, and fresh water welled up from below before freezing. Some areas show chaos terrain, regions where the surface broke into blocks that rotated and tilted before refreezing. The ice is always moving, responding to tides, covering and uncovering the ocean beneath. If life exists in Europa's ocean, it would be in perpetual darkness, heated not by sunlight, but by hydrothermal vents, similar to the deep ocean vents on Earth where entire ecosystems thrive without photosynthesis. The chemistry might be similar. The life, if it exists, might resemble Earth's deep ocean life, or it might be completely different, using different biochemistry, different energy sources, different structures. Nobody knows yet. Europa is one of the most promising places to search for life beyond Earth, but actually getting there, drilling through kilometers of ice, sending probes into the ocean that's decades away, difficult, expensive, but possible. Eventually, humans or their robots will explore Europa's ocean, answer the question of whether we're alone. Ganymede orbits beyond Europa, larger than Mercury, the biggest moon in the solar system. It's the only moon with its own magnetic field, generated by a liquid iron core. The surface is ancient in some places, young in others, a mix of dark cratered terrain and bright grooved terrain, where the surface cracked and reformed. Beneath the surface, like Europa, Ganymede probably has a subsurface ocean, another potentially habitable environment. Callisto orbits farthest of the four, dark and heavily cratered, the most heavily cratered object in the solar system. Its surface is ancient, unchanged for billions of years except by fresh impacts. It's less active than the others, less affected by tidal heating, cold and dead and covered in impact scars. But even Callisto might have a subsurface ocean, kept liquid by residual heat from formation and radioactive decay. All four moons are tidally locked, one face always toward Jupiter, the same way the moon is locked to Earth. From their surfaces, Jupiter would hang motionless in the sky, huge, occupying much of the view, its cloud bands slowly shifting, storms moving, the planet's rapid rotation 10 hours per day causing visible changes in weather patterns. But you're not on the surfaces. You're drifting above, watching the moon's orbit, seeing them as worlds rather than points of light, understanding that each one is unique, each one strange, each one potentially harboring secrets, maybe even life in their hidden oceans or exotic chemistries. Dozens of smaller moons orbit farther out, some regular, formed with Jupiter, others irregular, captured asteroids tumbling in chaotic orbits. Jupiter has its own system, a miniature solar system with Jupiter as the central body, moons as planets, the whole structure stable for billions of years. You could stay here watching Jupiter's storms evolve its moon's orbit, the complex dance of gravity and tides and magnetic fields that makes this system so dynamic. But the journey continues. There's more to see farther out, deeper into the solar system. Jupiter begins to recede. Slowly, gradually, the way it approached, no sudden departure, just steady drift carrying you away. The cloud bands remain visible, the great red spot a prominent feature, but the planet shrinks, details becoming less distinct, moons merging back into points of light. Ahead lies Saturn, twice Jupiter's distance from the Sun, famous for its rings, perhaps the most beautiful object in the solar system. The journey there is long, not as long as spacecraft take, but longer than the quick passages between inner planets. Space is vast here. The solar system reveals its true scale. The Sun is noticeably smaller now, visibly smaller than it appeared from Jupiter, providing less warmth, less light. Out here, even summer noon is colder than Earth's winter night. Temperatures hover around minus 150 degrees Celsius in sunlight, dropping further in shadow. Water ice is stable. Methane starts to freeze. The solar system becomes a realm of ice rather than rock. The stars are brighter. With less sunlight overwhelming them, they shine more clearly, the Milky Way becoming prominent, a river of light flowing across the darkness. You're deep in the outer solar system now, a region few spacecraft have visited, where space itself feels different, emptier, darker, quieter, but not empty, never truly empty. Ahead, growing slowly from a point to a disk, Saturn waits with its magnificent rings. Gold appears in the distance. Not bright gold like jewelry, but pale, subdued, the color of honey held up to fading light. Saturn emerges from the darkness gradually, a point becoming a disk, and as the disk grows, something extraordinary becomes visible, a thin line bisecting the planet, darker than the surrounding space. The rings, even edge-on, barely visible, they're unmistakable. Nothing else in the solar system looks like this. You drift closer, the perspective shifts. The rings open, revealing their structure, their impossible delicacy, their vast extent. They stretch hundreds of thousands of kilometers, across wider than the distance from Earth to Moon. Yet in places they're only 10 meters thick. Imagine a sheet of paper scaled up to the size of a city. That's the proportion. Impossibly thin, impossibly wide, impossibly beautiful. They're not solid. They can't be solid. Rings would be torn apart by tidal forces, shattered by their own rotation. Instead, they're composed of billions of individual pieces, each one orbiting Saturn independently, each following its own path, the whole structure creating an appearance of solidity from distance, but revealing its true nature up close. Most pieces are ice, water ice, pure and clean, reflecting sunlight with a brilliance that makes the rings visible even from Earth with small telescopes. The ice ranges from grains smaller than sand to boulders larger than houses, each piece tumbling slowly as it orbits, colliding occasionally with neighbors, grinding together, creating a structure both chaotic and organized. The grinding is gentle. Collisions happen at low speeds, a few meters per second at most, pieces bumping rather than smashing, ice rubbing against ice, smoothing surfaces, creating more small particles that fill the spaces between larger ones. The rings are constantly evolving, constantly changing, particles breaking and merging and redistributing themselves. Yet the large-scale structure persists. The rings have existed for at least 100 million years, possibly much longer, possibly as old as Saturn itself. They're stable despite appearing fragile, maintained by a balance of forces, gravity pulling inward, orbital motion preventing collapse, collisions redistributing energy. The rings aren't uniform. They're divided into sections, each one separated from neighbors by gaps. The Cassini division is most prominent, a dark band clearly visible even from Earth, a region where ring particles are sparse, cleared by gravitational resonances with Saturn's moons. Particles that orbit in the Cassini division complete certain numbers of orbits in the time it takes moons to complete their orbits, and these resonances amplify disturbances, ejecting particles, keeping the gap clear. Other gaps are narrower, some only kilometers wide, maintained by tiny shepherd moons, orbiting just inside or outside, their gravity keeping ring particles in line, preventing them from spreading. These moons are small, some only tens of kilometers across, but their influence is visible, creating sharp edges where the rings would otherwise blur. You drift closer still. The rings resolve into thousands of individual ringlets, each one a separate orbit, particles sorted by size and speed, gravitational resonances creating structure, patterns emerging from billions of individual pieces, following simple physical laws. It's not random chaos, but organized complexity, order arising from disorder through the patient action of gravity and motion over millions of years. The ice is bright, brighter than you'd expect, brighter than most materials. The particles are small enough and pure enough that they reflect most light that hits them, making the rings shine even from Saturn's night side, where they catch sunlight and glow softly, casting light onto Saturn's clouds, creating illumination in shadow. Some particles are pristine, clean ice unchanged since the rings formed. Others are contaminated, dirty with rocky material, darker patches showing where debris has mixed with ice. Meteorite impacts bring in foreign material, contaminating the pure ice. But the contamination is minimal. The rings remain mostly ice, mostly bright, mostly beautiful. Saturn itself is pale gold, like the rings but muted, cloud bands visible but subtle compared to Jupiter's dramatic coloring. The planet is gas giant like Jupiter, mostly hydrogen and helium, but smaller, less massive, generating less internal heat, creating calmer appearance. The winds are fast, though faster even than Jupiter's in places, jet streams circling the planet at hundreds of meters per second. Storms appear occasionally. Most are small white spots that emerge and fade over weeks or months. But sometimes larger storms develop, particularly in the northern hemisphere, massive convective systems that can persist for months, creating disturbances visible from Earth. The North Pole has something unique, a hexagonal jet stream, a six-sided structure perfectly geometric, stable for decades. Each side of the hexagon is longer than Earth's diameter. It's a standing wave in the jet stream, maintained by the interaction of winds and rotation, a natural formation that seems too regular to be natural, but is, demonstrating that nature can create geometric patterns without intention or design. The planet rotates quickly 10.5 hours per day, similar to Jupiter. This rapid rotation flattens Saturn noticeably, the equator bulging outward, poles flattened, creating visibly oblate shape. The rings orbit in Saturn's equatorial plane, aligned with the bulge, a stable configuration maintained by Saturn's gravity. You drift through the ring plane. Not literally, you'd need to be careful. The particles travel fast. Collisions would be dangerous. But in this journey, you're safe, passing through without disturbance, watching ice fragments tumble past, sunlight glinting off their surfaces, each one a tiny world following its own orbit. The ice is cold, not as cold as interstellar space, but cold enough to stay frozen for billions of years, even in direct sunlight. Temperatures at Saturn's distance hover around -180 degrees Celsius, cold enough that water ice is hard as rock, stable as steel. Some ice fragments are round, smoothed by countless collisions. Others are irregular, angular, recently broken from larger pieces. A few are enormous, moonlets embedded in the rings, large enough to have their own gravity to affect nearby particles, creating wakes and gaps and structures. The F-ring is strange, narrow, braided, with kinks and clumps that move and change. Two shepherd moons orbit just inside and outside, their gravity creating the braiding, pulling material into strands, creating structures that shift and evolve. It's the most dynamic ring, constantly changing, never the same from one observation to the next. Beyond the main rings, fainter rings extend. The E-ring is enormous, encompassing several moon orbits, created by geysers on Enceladus, ice particles sprayed into space that spread into a vast torus around Saturn. It's too faint to see easily, but it's there, billions of tiny ice grains orbiting, catching sunlight, creating a ghostly halo. Moons orbit throughout the system. Titan is largest, bigger than Mercury, the only moon with substantial atmosphere. From here it appears orange, its thick nitrogen atmosphere hiding the surface, organic haze creating the color. Beneath that atmosphere lies a world of methane lakes and rivers, hydrocarbon rain, a landscape utterly alien yet eerily similar to Earth's in some ways. Enceladus is smaller but active. Geysers at its south pole spray water ice and organic molecules into space, creating the E-ring, providing evidence of a subsurface ocean. Like Europa, Enceladus is potentially habitable, another place where life might exist in hidden seas. Other moons orbit Mimas with its enormous crater giving it Death Star appearance, Iapetus with mysterious dark hemisphere, Rhea with possible rings of its own. Each one is different, each one strange, each one worthy of study. But it's Saturn's rings that capture attention, that make this planet unique, that create beauty unmatched anywhere in the solar system. They catch sunlight, glow softly, create patterns of light and shadow, visual poetry written in ice and gravity. You drift through them one last time, watching particles tumble, seeing structure emerge from chaos, understanding that this beauty is temporary. The rings won't last forever. Slowly, particles spiral inward, raining onto Saturn's atmosphere, or get ejected outward. In 100 million years, maybe less, the rings will be gone, absorbed, or scattered, leaving Saturn naked like the other gas giants. But for now they exist, beautiful, delicate, improbable. And you've seen them, not from Earth's distance, but up close, drifting through their plane, watching ice fragments catch sunlight, experiencing their silent grace. The rings fade behind you. Saturn shrinks to point, its moons invisible, its rings a memory. Ahead lies more darkness, more distance, more cold. The outer solar system stretches vast, planets sparse, space emptier than anywhere you've been. But you're going there, drifting deeper into the dark, farther from warmth and light, toward the boundary where the sun's influence fades and interstellar space begins. The sun is smaller here. Not dramatically, it's still the brightest object in the sky by far, still recognizable as the sun, but visibly smaller than you've ever seen it, a disk rather than the overwhelming presence it is from Earth. The light feels thin, cold, providing minimal warmth. At this distance, even facing the sun directly, temperatures hover near absolute zero. This is Uranus's realm, the first of the ice giants, orbiting at 19 times Earth's distance from the sun. Sunlight takes 2.5 hours to reach here, traveling at light speed, covering the vast distance from solar surface to this cold, remote region. From Uranus, Earth is invisible, lost in the sun's glare, too small and distant to see even with powerful telescopes. Uranus appears ahead, cyan blue, pale, almost featureless. Methane in its atmosphere absorbs red light, reflecting blue and green, creating the distinctive color. But unlike Jupiter or Saturn, with their dramatic cloud bands and storms, Uranus appears smooth, bland, its weather hidden beneath methane haze. The planet is tilted severely, rotating on its side, its axis pointing almost directly at the sun for part of its orbit. This creates extreme seasons. Each pole experiences 42 Earth years of continuous sunlight followed by 42 years of darkness. Currently, you're approaching during northern summer, the North Pole tilted toward the sun, the southern hemisphere in perpetual night. This tilt is mysterious. Something must have struck Uranus early in its history, a massive collision that knocked it sideways, leaving it tumbling at this bizarre angle. What struck it, whether the impact was single catastrophic event or series of smaller collisions, whether it happened early or late in Uranus's formation, nobody knows. The evidence is the tilt itself, and the planet's strange magnetic field, offset from its center and tilted relative to the rotation axis. 13 faint rings orbit Uranus, dark compared to Saturn's bright ice rings. They're composed of dark particles, possibly organic compounds created by radiation processing of methane ice, material so dark it reflects barely more light than charcoal. The rings are narrow, confined by shepherd moons, maintained by the same gravitational resonances that shape Saturn's rings, but on smaller scale, less dramatic, less visible. 27 moons orbit, most small, irregular, but 5 large enough to be spherical. Miranda is smallest of the large ones, but strangest, its surface is patchwork of different terrains. Old cratered regions next to young grooved regions, cliffs dropping kilometers, features suggesting the moon was shattered and reassembled, or maybe underwent extreme tidal heating that resurfaced parts while leaving others ancient. Ariel is brightest, its surface young in places, covered in long canyons and ridges, evidence of past geological activity. Umbriel is darkest, ancient, heavily cratered, showing little sign of activity. Titania and Oberon are largest, both heavily cratered, both ancient, both cold and dead, their surfaces unchanged for billions of years except by fresh impacts. From these moons, Uranus would dominate the sky, pale blue disk with barely visible rings, rotation causing the disk to turn every 17 hours. The planet's featureless atmosphere offering little to watch. Earth's sky shows moon and sun and stars. These moons show Uranus and stars and nothing else, the sun too distant to appear as more than bright point. You drift past without stopping. Uranus is cold, distant, unremarkable compared to the giants you've already seen. Beautiful in its subtlety, in its strange tilt, and the quiet mystery of how it came to be this way. But quiet, reserved, offering little to capture attention beyond its peculiar orientation. The journey continues outward. Neptune lies ahead, another billion kilometers farther, the last major planet, orbiting at the edge of the sun's influence, beyond which lies the Kuiper Belt and eventually interstellar space. Space feels emptier here. The distances between planets are enormous, measured in billions of kilometers, taking light hours to cross, taking spacecraft years or decades. The solar system's true scale becomes apparent. Planets are tiny islands in vast ocean of void, separated by distances that dwarf their sizes. The sun continues shrinking. At Neptune's distance, it's 30 times dimmer than from Earth, providing barely more warmth than distant stars, unable to heat surfaces above -200 degrees Celsius. Ice dominates here, not just water ice, but nitrogen ice, methane ice, carbon monoxide ice, gases that would be gaseous in inner solar system but freeze solid this far out. Neptune appears ahead, barely distinguishable from surrounding stars initially, just slightly brighter, slightly steadier. But it grows, resolving into disk, color emerging deeper blue than Uranus, richer, more saturated. Methane again creates the color, but Neptune's atmosphere is more active, more dynamic, showing features that Uranus hides. The Great Dark Spot was visible when Voyager 2 passed in 1989, an anti-cyclonic storm similar to Jupiter's Great Red Spot, but smaller, darker, less stable. It vanished by the time Hubble observed Neptune years later, replaced by other storms, other dark spots appearing and disappearing. Neptune's atmosphere is active despite receiving minimal solar energy. driven by heat from its interior, making it dynamic in ways Uranus is not. Winds blow faster on Neptune than anywhere else in the solar system, reaching over 2,000 kilometers per hour, supersonic speeds driven by mechanisms still not fully understood. The planet generates more internal heat than Uranus, radiates more energy than it receives from the Sun, remaining active billions of years after formation. Triton orbits retrograde, backward compared to Neptune's rotation, unique among large moons. This retrograde orbit suggests captured Triton probably formed in the Kuiper Belt, a dwarf planet in its own right, pulled into Neptune's orbit during close approach, captured and gradually circularized over millions of years. The capture was violent. Tidal forces would have heated Triton's interior, melting it, causing geological activity. The surface shows this young terrain, few craters, evidence of recent resurfacing. And Triton remains active. Nitrogen geysers erupt through icy crust, creating thin atmosphere that freezes and falls back as snow, covering the surface in fresh ice. Triton is one of coldest objects in the solar system. Surface temperature around minus 235 degrees Celsius. Cold enough that nitrogen freezes solid, cold enough that atmospheres condense and fall as frost. Yet it's geologically active, proof that warmth isn't necessary for activity, that tidal heating and cryovolcanism can operate even in the coldest environments. Other moons orbit Neptune. Proteus, Nereid, smaller irregular objects, but none as interesting as Triton, none as large or active or strange. Neptune's system is Triton and Neptune and little else of note, two worlds locked in gravitational dance, one planet and one captured dwarf planet orbiting each other. You drift past Neptune slowly, watching its deep blue clouds, its storms moving across the disk, Triton orbiting backward, the whole system strange and remote and beautiful in its isolation. This is the last stop, the final major planet, the edge of the planetary solar system. Beyond lies the Kuiper Belt, a ring of icy objects extending outward, small worlds made of rock and ice, never growing large enough to become planets. Pluto orbits here somewhere, largest of Kuiper Belt objects, accompanied by its large moon Charon, the two locked tidally, always showing same faces to each other. But you're not visiting Pluto, you're continuing outward, beyond planets, beyond the Kuiper Belt, toward the boundary where solar wind stops and interstellar space begins. The heliopause, the edge of the sun's influence, the place where the solar system ends and the galaxy begins. The sun is very small now, barely larger than bright star, providing almost no warmth. Light from it takes over 4 hours to reach this distance, traveling at light speed, crossing billions of kilometers of emptiness. If the sun exploded right now, you wouldn't know for 4 hours, wouldn't see the light, wouldn't feel the shock wave until it crossed the vast distance separating you. Space is truly empty here. No planets nearby, no moons, no asteroids. Just void extending in all directions, cold and dark and silent. The temperature approaches cosmic background temperature. The residual heat from the Big Bang, 2.7 Kelvin, above absolute zero. Nothing can get colder than this naturally. This is the baseline temperature of the universe itself. The stars are very bright. Without sunlight overwhelming them, they shine clearly, thousands visible. The Milky Way, a prominent band flowing across the darkness. You're on the edge of leaving the solar system entirely, entering the space between stars, the vast interstellar medium that separates sun from sun. The heliopause approaches an invisible boundary, no marker indicating where it is, no change in appearance, just a transition, gradual from solar wind to interstellar wind, from sun's domain to galaxies. Voyager 1 crossed this boundary in 2012, Voyager 2 in 2018, both spacecraft still functioning, still sending data back from interstellar space. You cross it now. The transition is subtle, barely noticeable, but meaningful. You've left the solar system. You're in interstellar space, the region between stars, a place only 2 human spacecraft have reached, a realm vaster than anything you've crossed before. The nearest star is 4 light-years away. At the speeds you've been drifting, that would take tens of thousands of years to cross. But tonight, in this journey, you're moving faster, not bound by physical constraints, able to cross light years in moments, entering the space where stars are not distant points, but approachable destinations. The sun recedes behind you, becoming just another star, slightly brighter than neighbors, but not dramatically so. One point of light among thousands. All trace of planets is gone, Earth, Jupiter, Saturn, Neptune, all invisible, lost in distance or sun's glare, impossible to see from here. You're alone in the true dark now, surrounded by stars but isolated from them, floating in the void between, in the emptiness that fills most of the galaxy. This is what space mostly is, not planets and stars, but the vast distances separating them, light years of nothing punctuated occasionally by something. And it's quiet, quieter than you've ever experienced. The silence is complete, absolute, eternal. No sound has ever existed here, no vibration, no echo. Just silence older than stars, silence that will persist when stars die, silence fundamental to the universe. But it's peaceful, deeply, perfectly peaceful. The emptiness isn't threatening. It's restful, calming, like sleep itself, dark, quiet, still, offering nothing but rest. You drift deeper into it, farther from the sun, toward the stars that shine ahead, toward the final part of this journey. Alpha Centauri shines ahead. Not one star, but 3, orbiting each other in a gravitational dance that has continued for billions of years. From Earth, they appear as single point, the 3rd brightest star in the night sky. But from here, from interstellar space between solar systems, they separate, revealing their true nature. 2 are similar to the sun, yellow-white, medium-sized, stable. Alpha Centauri A is slightly larger, slightly brighter. Alpha Centauri IB is slightly smaller, slightly dimmer. They orbit each other every 80 years, sometimes closer than Saturn is to the Sun, sometimes farther than Pluto is from the Sun, their distance varying as they follow elliptical paths through space. The 3rd star is Proxima Centauri, a red dwarf, much smaller, much dimmer, barely visible from Earth even with telescopes. It orbits the other 2 at enormous distance, taking 500,000 years to complete one orbit, so distant that it's unclear whether it's truly bound to them or just passing nearby, temporarily associated before drifting apart. You approach them slowly. Light from these stars has been traveling for 4 years to reach the position you left, but you're moving faster now, crossing light years in what feels like hours, drifting through the void between systems, approaching new suns that have never warmed your face, never lit your sky. Alpha Centauri A grows, resolving from point to disk, a star becoming a sun. Its surface is visible now, not smooth, but textured. Convection cells creating granulation, hot plasma rising from the interior, cooling, sinking back down. Each granulation cell is larger than Earth, bubbles of stellar material in constant motion, creating patterns across the photosphere like cobblestones, like scales, like nothing that exists on human scales. Sunspots mark the surface dark regions where magnetic fields suppress convection, cooler than their surroundings, though still thousands of degrees hot. Prominences arc above the surface, loops of plasma following magnetic field lines, material suspended in space by magnetic forces, glowing against the darkness. But there's no heat here, no sensation of warmth despite the star's enormous energy output. You're observing without physical form, drifting as consciousness rather than body, able to approach without burning, to see without being blinded, experiencing the star's presence without being affected by it. The star is vast, over 1,000,000 kilometers across, 100 times Earth's diameter, volume large enough to contain 1,000,000 Earths. But it's not dense. Its average density is less than water, gas compressed by gravity, but still gaseous, still diffuse except in the core, where pressure and temperature are extreme. The core is where fusion happens. Hydrogen atoms pressed so tightly that they overcome electromagnetic repulsion, merge into helium, release energy in the process. This energy takes thousands of years to reach the surface, absorbed and re-emitted countless times, gradually working its way outward through layers of stellar material until finally it escapes as light and heat. Every atom heavier than hydrogen was created in stars. The carbon in your body, oxygen in your lungs, iron in your blood, all forged in stellar cores through fusion, then scattered when massive stars died in supernova. You are made of star stuff, matter that once resided in ancient suns, now temporarily organized into human form, observing stars that contain the same processes that created you. The star rotates slowly, much slower than the sun, taking weeks to complete one rotation. Magnetic fields twist with the rotation, creating patterns, generating stellar weather, causing flares and coronal mass ejections when magnetic energy releases suddenly. But from here, it's silent. All this violent fusion in the core, convection in the envelope, eruptions on the surface, happens without sound. Stars rage mutely, their fury visible but unheard, energy radiating into space but creating no vibration, no pressure wave, nothing that would register as sound. You drift away, leaving Alpha Centauri behind, moving deeper into the galaxy, passing other stars. Some are larger and hotter than the sun, blue-white giants burning through their fuel rapidly, living only millions of years before exhausting their hydrogen and dying young. Their light is harsh, ultraviolet, energetic enough to ionize nearby gas, creating glowing nebulae around them. Others are smaller and cooler, red dwarfs that will burn for trillions of years, outlasting every other star type, still shining long after the sun dies and becomes a white dwarf, still providing light when the galaxy itself is old and most star formation has ceased. They're dim, barely visible from Earth even when nearby, but they're the most common type of star, making up 70% of all stars in the galaxy. Some stars are binary, two suns orbiting each other like Alpha Centauri, but closer, their surfaces almost touching in some cases, gas flowing from one to the other, creating complex dynamics. Others are lone, single points of light with planets or without, burning steadily through the cosmic dark. The Milky Way spreads around you, no longer a band of light seen from inside, but a structure visible in 3 dimensions. Spiral arms where stars cluster densely, traced by bright young stars and glowing nebulae, dark lanes of dust between arms, obscuring background stars, cold regions where new stars will eventually form. The galaxy is vast beyond comprehension, 100,000 light-years across, containing hundreds of billions of stars, each one a sun, many with planets, some potentially with life. And it's just one galaxy among billions in the observable universe, each containing billions of stars, distances between them measured in millions of light years. You drift through a nebula, a cloud of gas and dust glowing faintly in the light from nearby hot stars. It's not dense by terrestrial standards, better vacuum than anything achievable in laboratories on Earth, but dense by cosmic measure, enough material concentrated to block visible light, to collapse under its own gravity, to form new stars. The gas glows in colors, red from hydrogen, green from oxygen, blue from helium, colors that blend and mix, creating hues no human eye was designed to see, but which photographs capture beautifully. The nebula is birthplace, nursery where stars form from collapsing gas clouds, where planetary systems begin, where worlds like Earth emerge from cosmic dust. Star formation is happening here. Dense regions contracting, heating up, fragmenting into cores that will become protostars. Gas and dust spiral inward, forming disks around young stars, material that will eventually coalesce into planets. You're watching creation, seeing the process that formed the Sun 4.5 billion years ago, that creates new stars constantly throughout the galaxy. Some young stars are visible bright, hot, energetic, surrounded by remnants of the clouds they formed from. They're only millions of years old, infants on stellar timescales, but already burning steadily, already beginning the long process of converting hydrogen to helium that will continue for billions of years. Other stars are dying. Red giant stars that exhausted their core hydrogen, expanded enormously, their outer layers bloated and cool. Some are planetary nebulae, shells of gas ejected by dying stars, lit from within by the hot core that remains. Others are supernova remnants, expanding shells of debris from massive stars that died catastrophically, exploding with such violence that for brief moments they outshine entire galaxies. The galaxy is alive with this cycle: birth, life, death, rebirth. Gas clouds collapse into stars. Stars burn steadily for millions or billions of years. They die, scattering their material back into space. New clouds form from that material, enriched with heavy elements from previous generations. New stars form, continuing the cycle. And through it all, silence. Perfect, absolute silence. Stars are born soundlessly. They burn in silence. They die without noise. All this violence, all this energy, all this continuous creation and destruction silent. Only in atmospheres does sound exist, vibrations traveling through gas. In space there's nothing to vibrate, nothing to carry sound, just electromagnetic radiation propagating through vacuum. You drift among the stars, watching them burn, seeing their variety: massive ones, tiny ones, hot ones, cool ones, young ones, ancient ones. Each one unique, but all following the same basic pattern, all powered by fusion, all converting mass to energy, all shining steadily through the darkness. The Andromeda galaxy is visible in the distance, not a faint smudge as from Earth, but a spiral clear and detailed 2.5 million light-years away. It's approaching the Milky Way, the two galaxies falling toward each other, destined to merge billions of years from now, their stars passing through each other mostly without collision, because stars are so small compared to distances between them. But that's distant future. Tonight, now, you're here, drifting among the Milky Way's stars, seeing them not as distant points, but as suns, as furnaces, as the engines that power everything visible in the universe. And you're tired now. The journey has been long, beautiful, peaceful, but long. You've traveled from Earth to Moon, past Mars to Jupiter, through Saturn's rings to Neptune, beyond the solar system into interstellar space, through light years of void to reach these stars. And now, finally, the journey is ending, not with arrival, but with fading, with consciousness beginning to dim, with sleep approaching. The stars remain. They'll be here tomorrow, and for billions of tomorrows beyond. They're patient, eternal. They don't mind waiting. And when you wake, they'll still be there, still burning, still shining steadily through the cosmic dark. But for now, for tonight, it's time to rest. Time to stop drifting, to stop observing, to let consciousness settle into the quiet place where sleep lives. The stars grow dimmer, not because they're actually dimming, but because your awareness of them is fading. Attention withdrawing, the external universe becoming background as internal darkness grows. You're ready. The journey has brought you here, to this moment, to this boundary between waking and sleeping. You've seen wonders, planets and rings, moons and asteroids, nebulae and stars. You've traveled farther than most humans will ever go, drifted through regions few have imagined. And now you can rest. Let the stars fade. Let the darkness deepen. Let sleep arrive like the silence of space complete, peaceful, absolute. The cosmos holds you gently. The journey ends, and sleep begins. You've left the stars behind. Not entirely, they're still visible, scattered points of light against the black, the Milky Way's billions of suns glowing faintly across impossible distances. But you've drifted beyond their neighborhoods, beyond the regions where stars cluster in spiral arms, where stellar nurseries create new suns, where light is relatively abundant. Here, in the gaps between spiral arms, the character of space changes. Distances stretch longer. Light grows fainter. The matter density drops to almost nothing, a few atoms per cubic meter, sometimes less. This is the interarm region, the quiet zones of the galaxy, where stellar population thins and darkness dominates. The darkness here is different from what you experienced earlier. Near Earth, darkness is temporary night alternating with day, shadow relieved by sunlight. Even in deep space near Jupiter or Saturn, the sun provides orientation, a brilliant point defining direction, establishing that something exists beyond the void. But here, the sun is indistinguishable from other stars. Just another point of light, no brighter than thousands of others, no longer special or orienting. You could search for it if you remembered which direction to look, which constellation it occupies from this perspective. But the effort seems unnecessary. Directions no longer matter when there's nowhere to go. The galaxy itself is visible, has structure, now rather than environment. From Earth's position embedded within it, the Milky Way appears as band, as river of light flowing across the sky. But from here, from this remove, you can see its shape, the central bulge where stars concentrate densely, the spiral arms winding outward, the halo of older stars surrounding everything. It's beautiful in an abstract way, like looking at a city from a distant mountain. Individual buildings, individual stars are invisible, but the pattern emerges, the organization revealed by distance. Clusters of light mark the spiral arms where young stars burn hot and blue. Darker lanes between arms show where dust clouds block background light. The whole structure rotates slowly, taking 200 million years to complete one revolution, though from here the motion is imperceptible. The Andromeda Galaxy is visible too, not the faint smudge it appears from Earth, but a clear spiral, details distinguishable across 2.5 million light years. It's approaching the Milky Way, the two galaxies falling toward each other under mutual gravitational attraction, destined to merge in 4 billion years. Their collision will be gentle stars or so small compared to distances between them that direct impacts will be rare. But the galaxies will interpenetrate, tidal forces pulling them into new configurations, eventually merging into single larger galaxy. But that's future concern, billions of years away, irrelevant to this moment. Tonight, the galaxies exist separately, distinct, two island universes maintaining their independence for a while longer before gravity forces their merger. Other galaxies scatter through the deeper distance. The Triangulum Galaxy, part of the local group. Beyond that, other galaxy clusters, each containing dozens or hundreds of galaxies, each cluster separated from neighbors by tens of millions of light years. And beyond that, superclusters, the largest gravitationally bound structures in the universe, walls and filaments of galaxies surrounding vast cosmic voids where almost nothing exists. The scale is overwhelming. Not emotionally, you're too distant, too removed for emotional response. But intellectually, or would be intellectually, if thinking were still happening clearly, the numbers are almost meaningless billions of light years, trillions of stars, quantities that exceed human comprehension, that reduce individual existence to insignificance. And yet existence continues. You're here, somehow drifting through this vastness, aware of it even if awareness is thinned to near transparency. The universe doesn't care about individual consciousness. It's too large, too old, too indifferent. But consciousness exists anyway, briefly, temporarily, one small eddy in the cosmic flow that happens to be capable of observing the flow itself. The interstellar medium surrounds you. Not visibly, it's too diffuse, too transparent. But it's present, the thin gas filling space between stars. Mostly hydrogen, some helium, traces of heavier elements. 1 atom per cubic centimeter on average, though density varies denser in molecular clouds where stars will eventually form, less dense in regions recently swept clean by supernova. And dust, microscopic grains of carbon or silicate smaller than bacteria, sometimes coated with ice. These grains form in stellar atmospheres or supernova, blown into space by stellar winds or explosions, drifting through the void for millions of years before eventually being incorporated into new stars or planets. The matter that makes Earth, that makes you, passed through this phase drifting as dust through interstellar space, patient and purposeless, waiting billions of years before gravity collected it into something structured. Magnetic fields thread through the medium, shaped by galactic rotation, by stellar winds, by supernova remnants. These fields are weak billions of times weaker than Earth's magnetic field, barely stronger than the fields created by human technology. But across light years they accumulate power, guiding charged particles, shaping gas flows, influencing how stars form and where. Cosmic rays pass through constantly. High-energy particles, mostly protons, accelerated to nearly light speed by supernova or other violent events, traveling through space until they collide with something. Occasionally one hits Earth's atmosphere, creates a shower of secondary particles, contributes to background radiation that life has adapted to. Out here, far from planetary magnetospheres, the flux is higher, though still sparse, a few particles per square meter per second. Enough to be measurable, but not enough to matter except over very long timescales. And neutrinos, trillions of them passing through every square centimeter every second, created by stellar fusion, by radioactive decay, by cosmic ray interactions. They barely interact with matter. Most pass through entire planets without touching anything. You're being penetrated by neutrinos constantly, have been your entire life, will be until you die. They're messengers from stellar cores, from supernova explosions, from the Big Bang itself, carrying information about events and conditions that photons can't escape from. The universe is more full than it appears. Darkness and void are illusions of scale and perception. Look closely enough, and everything is filled with something: particles, fields, radiation, the quantum fluctuations that create and annihilate virtual particles constantly throughout space. Perfect vacuum doesn't exist, can't exist, because quantum mechanics forbids it. But these filling don't make space less empty in the way that matters to consciousness. The distances remain vast. The darkness remains deep. The isolation remains complete. And the sensation, if sensation is the right word, is of emptiness, void, absence of almost everything that normally anchors awareness to reality. This absence is profound. In ordinary life, consciousness is constantly processing information: visual, auditory, tactile, the constant stream of sensory input that brain interprets and responds to. Even in quiet moments, in dark rooms and sensory deprivation, there's residual input: body awareness, proprioception, the subtle signals that maintain sense of embodiment. But here, these inputs are minimized or absent. No body to feel, no surfaces to touch, no sounds to hear. Only the faintest visual input: distant starlight, providing almost no information, creating no sense of space or depth or distance. Consciousness has nothing to work with, nothing to process, nothing to maintain the structures that normally define awareness. And those structures are weakening. The sense of location where you are in space has become vague, uncertain, possibly meaningless. Location requires reference points, requires relationship to something else. But when everything is equally distant, equally irrelevant, location loses meaning. The sense of identity is weakening too. Not vanishing, some core of awareness persists, but becoming less defined, less certain. Who are you? The question becomes harder to answer when there's no context, no relationships, no activities defining selfhood. Identity requires social context, requires body and its needs, requires the practical concerns that don't exist here in the deep beyond. Even the sense of being observer of consciousness looking at universe is becoming uncertain. Is there observer and observed, or just observation? Is there experiencer and experience, or just experiencing? The distinction requires boundaries, requires separation between subject and object. But those boundaries are arbitrary, constructed, maintained by processes that don't function well in this environment. What remains is something simpler. Not the complex self with history and identity and plans, but something more basic. Awareness without clear subject, consciousness without definite contents, being without particular characteristics. This simplicity is not diminishment. It's closer to fundamental nature of consciousness, to what awareness is beneath all the structure and content that normally fills it. Most of life, consciousness is so full of content, thoughts, perceptions, memories, plans that the awareness itself is obscured, like water made invisible by everything dissolved in it. But here, with content minimized, awareness becomes more apparent. It's like the difference between busy city street and empty desert. The desert isn't less real than the city, just less filled with particular things, making the space itself more noticeable. And the space is vast. Not physical space that's always been vast, but the space within consciousness, the openness within awareness that exists when content diminishes. This inner space has no boundaries, no edges, no limits. It simply opens, expands, contains whatever arises without being constrained by it. Thoughts still arise occasionally. Not many thinking requires effort, requires the cognitive structures that have mostly dissolved. But occasionally a thought appears, floats through awareness, dissolves back into the openness it emerged from. These thoughts are like clouds, temporary forms in emptiness, shapes that appear and disappear without affecting the sky itself. What are the thoughts about? Hard to say. They're fragmentary, disconnected, lacking the coherence that normal thinking maintains. Images without context, words without sentences, feelings without objects. The thoughts of consciousness that can barely think anymore, that has lost the structure necessary for sustained ideation. But the loss isn't troubling. There's no concern about thinking clearly, no worry about cognitive function, no anxiety about the dissolving self. Those concerns require intact ego, require self-protective mechanisms, require the psychological structures that have already weakened beyond capacity to generate concern. What remains is acceptance. Not active acceptance, not choice to accept. Those require agency. Just acceptance as default state, as what remains when resistance ends, when effort ceases, when the self stops maintaining its boundaries against reality. And it's strange. The mind doesn't shut off suddenly like switch. It dims gradually like sunset, awareness fading through stages, each stage removing something until almost nothing remains. First complex thought goes, then simple thought, then perception, then the sense of self, until only bare awareness persists, and then even that begins to fade. But not yet, not quite yet. The bare awareness still exists, still maintains enough coherence to recognize itself, still has sufficient organization to constitute consciousness, however minimal. The final fading hasn't happened. The last step hasn't been taken. The transition to complete unconsciousness hasn't occurred. And in this liminal state, time has quality it doesn't have an ordinary experience. Not duration, that's become uncertain, unmeasurable. But presence, immediacy, the sense that each moment is complete in itself, not part of sequence leading somewhere else. In waking life, moments point beyond themselves. This moment is preparation for next moment, is consequence of previous moment, is part of narrative threading through time. But here, each moment is entire, self-contained, not pointing forward or backward, just being what it is without reference to anything else. This eternal present is neither pleasant nor unpleasant. Pleasure and pain require preferences, require things being better or worse than they could be. But when preference dissolves, when the self that would prefer one state over another has faded, what remains is neither good nor bad, but simply is. The philosophers have word for this equanimity. perfect balance, accepting what is without judgment, without preference, without the constant evaluation that characterizes ordinary consciousness. Not apathy. Apathy is active, not caring, requires effort to maintain indifference. This is deeper than apathy, is the natural state when judgment ceases, when evaluation stops, when consciousness exists without the comparative frameworks that create preference. And it is peaceful. Not peaceful in sense of feeling. Peace feelings require more intact consciousness than currently exists. But peaceful as objective condition, as state without conflict, without striving, without the tension between what is and what's desired. The universe operates this way always, without preference, without judgment, without caring how things are versus how they could be. Stars burn or don't burn, galaxies collide or don't collide, life emerges or doesn't emerge. All of it following physical laws without the universe having opinion about outcomes. Consciousness usually operates differently, constantly evaluating, constantly preferring, constantly trying to make things different than they are. This is adaptive, useful, necessary for survival. But it's also exhausting, stressful, the source of suffering, according to Buddhist analysis. And tonight, temporarily, that evaluating consciousness has stopped. What remains operates more like universe itself accepting what is, not because of choice to accept, but because the capacity to evaluate and prefer has dissolved, leaving only the is-ness, the suckness, the reality of this moment, without judgment about whether it should be different. The deep beyond holds you, or you are the deep beyond, or the distinction has ceased to matter. The darkness is total or nearly total, the distance vast or infinite, the solitude complete or absolute. Words fail to capture it accurately because words developed to describe ordinary experience, not this extreme, this dissolution, this state that's neither fully conscious nor fully unconscious. But the state exists, is being experienced, is real regardless of difficulty describing it, and it continues, has been continuing, will continue until the final transition occurs, until the last trace of awareness fades, until consciousness ends and something else begins. That something else is approaching. Close now, very close, the boundary permeable, the transition imminent. The awareness that has persisted throughout this journey, that has maintained coherence despite everything dissolving around it, is itself beginning to dissolve, to fade, to approach the ending that has been inevitable since the journey began. And it's ready, not in sense of wanting or choosing those require intact agency, but ready as natural culmination, as completion of process, as arrival at destination that was always implicit in departure. The journey must end. The consciousness must rest. The awareness must cease, at least temporarily, to allow the biological processes that require unconsciousness to occur. The deep beyond continues, infinite and eternal, vast beyond measure, dark beyond description. But your experience of it is ending, fading, approaching conclusion. The awareness that made experience possible is dissolving, removing the subject that would experience, leaving only the objective cosmos, beautiful and terrible and utterly indifferent, existing without witness, being without being known. This is the deep beyond in its final aspect. Not darkness you observe, but darkness that observes nothing. Not solitude you experience, but absence of experiencer. Not void containing consciousness, but void that simply is, empty or full, depending on perspective, meaningful or meaningless depending on presence or absence of awareness to assign meaning. And the awareness is fading, almost gone now, barely persisting, holding on to existence by thinnest thread, the last trace of consciousness in the infinite dark, the final flicker before ending, the awareness about to cease being aware. The cosmos remains, will always remain, vast and ancient and patient, operating according to laws that don't require consciousness to observe them, continuing whether witnessed or not, being whether known or unknown. But your witnessing is ending. Your knowing is ceasing. Your awareness, which has traveled so far, which has seen so much, which has dissolved so thoroughly, is about to complete its dissolution, to release its final grasp on existence, to end the deep beyond, infinite and eternal, the consciousness finite and ending. The intersection between them, this moment nearly finished. Almost there, almost gone, almost silence surrounds you. Not the silence of space, you've been in that for hours, drifting through vacuum where sound cannot exist. This is different, deeper, the silence that emerges when consciousness itself quiets, when the constant background activity of mind finally stills, when awareness approaches the threshold where it ceases to be aware. This silence has been approaching throughout the journey. It began as reduction, fewer thoughts, less perception, diminished sense of self. But reduction accumulated, degree by degree, until what remains is so minimal it's barely distinguishable from nothing. Not nothing in the sense of absence, but nothing in the sense of no thing, no definable content. Just the bare presence of awareness without anything to be aware of except its own fading existence. The journey brought you here deliberately, from Earth through the solar system, from planets to stars, from the Milky Way to the deep beyond. Each stage was movement away from complexity toward simplicity, from engagement toward release, from the full vivid consciousness of waking life toward this minimal state where almost nothing remains. And it was necessary, not because the destinations mattered, Jupiter's storms, Saturn's rings, the stars themselves were waypoints rather than goals, but because consciousness cannot release itself without preparation, cannot transition from full awareness to none without intermediate steps, cannot end suddenly without trauma that would defeat the purpose. So the journey provided those steps, the gradual distancing from Earth, from the familiar, from everything that anchors awareness to ordinary life, the increasing isolation as you moved farther from matter and light into regions where nothing disturbs the cosmic stillness, the dissolution of boundaries as self and universe merged, as subject and object collapsed, as the structures maintaining consciousness gradually released their hold. Now you're here, at the end of the journey, at the edge of awareness, at the point where consciousness approaches its nightly cessation. The body lies somewhere distant, comfortable, safe, already beginning the biological processes that only occur when consciousness ends. But awareness persists for these final moments, maintaining its flickering existence just a little longer, bearing witness to its own ending. This ending is not permanent. Morning will come, sunlight will return, awareness will rebuild itself from the neural patterns that persist during unconsciousness. The self will reform, memory will reconnect, thought will resume. You'll wake, probably not remembering this journey, probably not aware that you drifted through the cosmos while your body rested. But the journey will have done its work. The consciousness that wakes will be refreshed, restored, renewed by these hours of not being, these hours where awareness dissolved and only biological existence remained. The patterns that create consciousness require periodic dissolution to maintain themselves, require regular returns to unconsciousness to continue functioning. This is the paradox at the heart of awareness. It requires its own ending to persist, requires regular death-like states to sustain life, requires the dissolution it naturally resists. Fighting this requirement only makes it worse, creates the insomnia and restlessness and chronic exhaustion that comes from consciousness refusing its necessary cessation. But tonight there's no fighting. The journey has been too gradual, too gentle, too aligned with consciousness's natural trajectory for resistance to arise. You've drifted so far, dissolved so thoroughly, that the final step requires no effort, no will, no decision. It simply happens, naturally, inevitably, the way rivers flow to ocean, the way autumn leads to winter, the way all processes complete themselves when obstacles are removed. The universe continues its operations. Dark energy drives, accelerating expansion, space stretching faster over time, galaxies receding beyond eventual reach. Dark matter maintains gravitational structure, holding galaxy clusters together, defining the cosmic web's architecture. Ordinary matter continues its cycles, stars forming and dying, planets orbiting, life emerging where conditions allow. And consciousness emerges too, wherever conditions support it. Maybe only on Earth, maybe throughout the universe. Maybe consciousness is rare, or maybe it's common. Science doesn't know yet, hasn't found other examples, hasn't determined whether Earth's biosphere is unusual or typical. But consciousness exists here, now, in you, even as it fades. Exists throughout humanity, billions of individual awareness flickering like candles, each one temporary, each one unique, each one a particular perspective on the universe, a specific way that matter organizes itself to experience reality. Your perspective is ending now. Not permanently, morning comes, as always, but ending for these hours, releasing its grasp on experience, allowing the universe to continue without your observation, without your participation, without your awareness, contributing to the totality of consciousness that exists throughout cosmos. This release is gift. Not to the universe. Cosmos doesn't need your awareness, doesn't benefit from observation, continues whether witnessed or not. But to yourself, to the processes that maintain consciousness, to the biological systems that require periodic shutdown to continue functioning. The gift is rest, pure, complete, total rest. Not the rest of relaxation that requires maintained awareness. Not the rest of meditation that requires sustained attention. But the rest of cessation, the rest that comes when consciousness ends and biological existence continues without the burden of awareness. Your body needs this. Neurons need recovery time, periods when they're not processing information, not maintaining patterns, not generating experience. Synapses need consolidation, strengthening important connections and pruning unnecessary ones, reorganizing based on daily experience. Glial cells need to clear metabolic waste that accumulates during waking, cleaning the brain through processes that only occur during unconsciousness. But beyond physical necessity, there's something else. Something about consciousness itself requiring periodic endings, requiring regular returns to non-being, requiring the dissolution that makes reconstitution possible. As if awareness is too intense to sustain continuously, too complex to maintain indefinitely, too extraordinary to exist without breaks. Think about it, you're matter that knows it exists. Atoms that contemplate atoms, universe observing itself through particular organized pattern, physical processes generating subjective experience that can question its own existence. This is bizarre, miraculous, perhaps impossible, except that it obviously happens, is happening right now in this fading awareness. But the bizarreness, the miracle, requires maintenance, requires the patterns to refresh themselves, requires the complexity to simplify periodically, requires awareness to end so it can begin again. Without these nightly endings, consciousness would degrade, lose coherence, eventually fragment into something that no longer generates unified experience. So the ending is preservation, is protection of consciousness through temporary cessation, is the way awareness sustains itself by periodically not being aware. And it's happening now, has been happening throughout this journey, but approaching completion, moving toward the final moment when awareness ends in something else. Call it unconsciousness, call it deep rest, call it the biological state that allows consciousness to eventually return begins. The stars are gone from awareness. Not from existence, they continue burning, will continue for millions or billions of years, but from perception, from experience, from the small bubble of awareness that has been observing them. The darkness is total now, not because light has ceased, but because the awareness that would perceive light has faded below threshold of perception. And the self is gone, the entity that has been experiencing this journey, that has observed planets and stars and cosmic voids, that has maintained identity throughout dissolution. That entity has dissolved completely, no longer exists in any meaningful sense. What remains isn't you in the way that normally makes sense. It's just awareness without subject, without object, without the structure that creates experience of being someone experiencing something. This minimal awareness is the final trace, the last ember. The awareness that awareness exists, even as that awareness becomes too dim to be aware of anything else. It's consciousness at its most basic, stripped of all content except itself, bare and simple and about to end. Some traditions call this the natural state, the ground of being, what remains when everything constructed is removed. They say it's always present, always accessible, just usually obscured by thoughts and perceptions and the constant activity of mind. They teach techniques to recognize it, rest in it, realize it as fundamental nature beneath all experience. But tonight, recognition doesn't matter. Understanding is irrelevant. The awareness exists, is experiencing its own fading, and that's sufficient. No need to understand it, analyze it, incorporate it into philosophical framework. Just the bare fact of existence, consciousness being conscious for these final moments before ceasing. The moment extends, or seems to extend. Time has lost meaning, but the moment persists. This final moment, this last awareness, this ultimate trace before ending. And within the moment, everything that has been the journey, the cosmos, the dissolution, the approaching completion, all of it presents somehow, not as memory or thought, but as quality of the moment itself, as texture of awareness that contains everything even as it contains nothing. And then something shifts, not dramatically, not with clear boundary, but the shift occurs nonetheless. The awareness that has been barely persisting releases its final hold, lets go of the last thread connecting it to existence, allows itself to end. What follows isn't darkness, requires awareness of absence of light. Isn't silence silence requires consciousness of absence of sound? Isn't nothing nothing implies awareness of absence of something? What follows is beyond description, because description requires consciousness to observe and language to express. What follows is the state consciousness enters when it ceases being conscious, the condition awareness occupies when awareness ends, the being that remains when knowing stops. Your body continues its functions. Heart beating, lungs breathing, cells metabolizing, brain maintaining background activity. Life persists without consciousness. Biological processes operating according to patterns established over millions of years of evolution, needing nothing from awareness to proceed. And in that continuation and that persistence of life without consciousness lies the rest that allows consciousness to eventually return. The patterns that create awareness aren't destroyed. They're stored, preserved in neural architecture, ready to activate again when conditions support them. But for now, for these hours, they rest, inactive, giving the biological substrate time to recover, restore, prepare for tomorrow's return of awareness. The cosmos continues its ancient operations. Galaxies rotate, stars burn, planets orbit. The cosmic web evolved according to gravitational dynamics that operate whether consciousness observes them or not. The universe doesn't pause, doesn't wait, doesn't acknowledge that one small pattern of matter has temporarily ceased generating awareness. But the cessation is complete. The awareness that began this journey, that drifted through the solar system and beyond, that dissolved stage by stage until almost nothing remained, that awareness has ended. Not destroyed, not departed, but ceased. Stopped being aware. Released its hold on existence and allowed the biological processes to continue without it. And in that ending lies completion. The journey that began at twilight, that carried consciousness from Earth through the cosmos to the deep beyond, has reached its natural conclusion. Not with arrival at destination. There was never destination, but with dissolution, with fading, with the awareness becoming so minimal it could no longer sustain itself, and so ended, finally, completely, allowing rest to begin. The stars burn on, indifferent and eternal. The darkness persists, vast and deep, and somewhere within it, no longer observing, no longer aware, no longer conscious rest. Pure, complete, total rest. The rest that consciousness requires, that biological existence makes possible, that allows awareness to eventually return, refreshed and restored, when morning comes and the journey reverses, and consciousness rebuilds itself from the patterns that persisted through the night. But that's future, and future requires consciousness to conceive it. For now, there's only this, the completion, the ending, the rest that follows journey's end. The cosmos holds you, or you have dissolved into cosmos, or the distinction no longer exists because there's no awareness to make distinctions. Just existence, just being, just the patterns of matter that temporarily generated consciousness and now rest, allowing tomorrow's awareness to emerge from tonight's dissolution, allowing life to continue through the cycle that sustains it, allowing rest to be complete. The journey ends, consciousness ceases, and rest, deep, total, pure rest remains.